In the ancient times, after the Great Flood, the descendants of Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, began to multiply and spread across the earth. One particular group of people settled in a plain in the land of Shinar. These people had a common furthermore, the story of Babel reveals the consequences of misplaced priorities. Language and shared a desire to build a great city and a tower that would reach the heavens. This ambitious project became known as the Tower of Babel. The people believed that by constructing this tower, they could make a name for themselves and avoid being scattered across the earth. Their intentions, however, were driven by pride and a desire for self-glorification rather than a genuine desire to honor God. God, observing their actions, decided to intervene. He knew that if the people were allowed to continue in their prideful endeavors, it would lead to even greater disobedience and a complete disregard for his authority. So, God decided to confuse their language. In Genesis 11:7-9, it is written, "Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. As a result of God's intervention, the people suddenly found themselves unable to communicate effectively with one another. This linguistic barrier hindered their progress on the tower, and they eventually abandoned the project and scattered across the earth, forming various nations with different languages and cultures. The story of the Tower of Babel carries several important lessons for humanity. First and foremost, it teaches us about the danger of pride and arrogance. The people of Babel sought to elevate themselves to the status of gods by constructing a tower that would reach the heavens. In their pride, they ignored the fact that true greatness comes from a humble heart that acknowledges and honors God. Furthermore, the story reminds us of the importance of unity and cooperation. The people of Babel initially worked together, speaking the same language and sharing a common goal. However, their unity was driven by self-centered motives rather than a desire to serve God or benefit others. When God confused their language, their unity disintegrated, leading to division and the scattering of people across the earth. As the people of Babel dispersed across the earth, each group developed its own distinct language, culture, and way of life. The linguistic division that occurred at Babel was not merely a punishment, but also a means of preserving diversity and preventing the concentration of power and pride. God's intention was for humanity to embrace their differences and learn to appreciate the rich tapestry of languages, cultures, and perspectives. The Tower of Babel narrative also underscores the importance of communication and understanding. When the people were united in their language, they worked together seamlessly towards their ambitious goal. However, when the gift of understanding was taken away, confusion and disarray followed. This serves as a reminder that effective communication is vital for the progress and unity of any community or society. It emphasizes the value of listening, empathy, and seeking common ground to bridge gaps and build meaning connections. The people of Babel focused their energies on the construction of a tower that would bring them acclaim and security, but they neglected their relationship with God. Their desire for earthly glory overshadowed their spiritual development and connection to the divine. It teaches us that when our pursuits become centered solely on worldly achievements or self-gain, we risk losing sight of our purpose and the greater significance of our existence. Ultimately, the Tower of Babel reminds us of our need for humility and dependence on God. It exposes the frailty of human endeavors when driven by pride and self-centeredness. God's intervention humbled the people of Babel and reminded them of their limitations as mere mortals. It serves as a cautionary tale against arrogance and a call to submit ourselves to God's plans and guidance. From the story of the Tower of Babel, we learn the importance of humility, unity rooted in love and understanding, effective communication, and a reliance on God's wisdom and sovereignty. These lessons urge us to embrace diversity, seek cooperation, and pursue a life centered on humility and obedience to God. By doing so, we can foster unity, build bridges across differences, and fulfill our true purpose of honoring God and serving one another. Pride leads to downfall. The Tower of Babel serves as a powerful reminder that pride is a destructive force. The people's pride led them to rebel against God's authority and pursue their own self-glorification. Their lofty ambitions were fueled by arrogance and a desire to exalt themselves above God. The story teaches us that pride ultimately leads to downfall and separation from God. It reminds us to cultivate humility and recognize our dependence on God rather than seeking self-promotion. God's plans supersede human plans, despite the people's grand aspirations and meticulous planning, God's sovereignty prevailed. He intervened and disrupted their plans, scattering them and confusing their language. The story emphasizes that God's plans and purposes cannot be thwarted by human endeavors. It reminds us to surrender our own plans to God, trust in His wisdom, and align ourselves with His will. We should seek His guidance and submit to His authority in all aspects of our lives. Unity should be based on righteousness. The people of Babel were united in their goal of building the tower, but their unity was built on pride and self-centeredness. True unity, however, should be grounded in righteousness and a shared commitment to God's principles. The story highlights the importance of aligning our pursuits with God's purposes and seeking unity based on moral and spiritual values. It teaches us that unity without righteousness is fragile and unsustainable. Language barriers can be bridges for understanding, while the confusion of languages at Babel caused division and hindered progress. It also served as a means to prevent the consolidation of human power and pride. The diverse languages and cultures that emerged from Babel have allowed for a richness of human expression and perspectives throughout history. The story reminds us that language barriers can be bridges for understanding and appreciation of diverse cultures and experiences. It encourages us to embrace linguistic and cultural diversity, fostering empathy and learning from one another. God's mercy and grace, despite the people's disobedience and pride. God's intervention at Babel can also be seen as an act of mercy. By dispersing the people, He prevented them from further descending into wickedness and protected them from the consequences of their arrogance. The story highlights God's loving discipline and His desire to steer humanity towards righteousness. It teaches us that even in our failures, God extends His grace and offers opportunities for redemption and growth. In summary, the story of the Tower of Babel warns us against pride and arrogance, highlights the importance of unity and cooperation rooted in humility, and reminds us of God's sovereignty over human affairs. By embracing humility, seeking unity based on love and understanding, and recognizing God's authority in our lives, we can learn from the mistakes of those at Babel and strive for a more harmonious and God-honoring world. Lastly, the story teaches us about God's sovereignty and His right to determine the course of human history. Despite the people's grand ambitions and efforts, God thwarted their plans and reminded them of His ultimate authority. It serves as a reminder that our lives and our achievements are ultimately in God's hands, and we should submit to His will rather than seeking our own glory. From the story of the Tower of Babel, we learn the importance of humility, unity rooted in love and understanding, effective communication, and these lessons urge us to embrace diversity, seek cooperation, and pursue a life centered on reliance on God's wisdom and sovereignty, humility and obedience to God. By doing so, we can foster unity, build bridges across differences, and fulfill our true purpose of honoring God and serving one another. Thanks for watching. You're blessed and lifted. Please like, comment, share and subscribe to my channel.